Henry VIII was not always a monster. As a young prince, he was handsome, athletic, and full of charm. People admired him. He loved music, dancing, and riding horses. But that man slowly disappeared. What came later was something darker, something no one dared to speak about openly. In his final years, Henry's body began to fall apart. His legs were swollen with huge sores that leaked every day. These wounds never healed. They got worse with time, turning black and smelling terrible. Servants said the stench was so strong, it could be noticed from far away. No one wanted to be near the king, but they had no choice. He became so overweight that he couldn't walk on his own. His waist measured over 50 inches. He had to be moved around in a special chair with wheels and pulleys. It took several men just to get him out of bed. He was once a strong ruler, but now he needed help to stand. Some servants were given the horrible task of cleaning his wounds. People cried when they were assigned. It was seen as punishment. Yet Henry never admitted he was sick. No one dared to suggest it. To question the king's health was the same as committing treason. His body was breaking down, but his pride refused to die. To find out what happened next, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell. Henry's leg wounds weren't just painful, they were deadly. The open sores became infected again and again. They leaked blood and yellow pus that soaked through his clothes. Sometimes, pieces of dead flesh would fall off. The palace had to burn the cloth used to clean him because the smell was so strong. It made people sick. Doctors tried everything. They used honey, wine, herbs. Nothing worked. They even drilled holes into his legs to let the pus drain, hoping to ease the pressure. But the pain only got worse. Henry screamed during treatments, cursing everyone around him. He began to hate the people who tried to help. By this time, Henry couldn't wear normal clothes. His legs were wrapped in thick bandages, and his robes had to be specially made to fit his massive body. The wounds got so bad that flies swarmed around him, even inside the palace. Guards had to fan the air just to keep the insects away. Still, no one dared to speak of his condition. Courtiers acted like everything was normal. They bowed and smiled, even as they covered their faces with perfumed cloths. The king's pride demanded silence. Admitting weakness was not allowed in his court. Henry was trapped in a body that disgusted everyone, including himself. Henry VIII's anger became worse as his body failed. He trusted no one, not his advisors, not his wives, not even his own children. He believed everyone was plotting against him. People were arrested just for speaking carelessly or looking nervous in front of him. Fear ruled the royal court like a shadow that never lifted. Every day, the palace was filled with whispers. Servants walked on eggshells, terrified of saying the wrong thing. Nobles who had served him for years were suddenly taken to the Tower of London, never to return. Some were tortured, others executed without trial. Henry didn't need proof. His suspicion alone was enough. He ordered secret doors built into the walls so he could leave rooms without being seen. His food was tasted by 3 different people before he ate it. Even his drinking water was tested. He kept daggers under his pillow and crossbows near his bed. Armed guards watched him sleep. He wasn't just scared of assassins. He thought his own courtiers might poison him. Henry also had spies everywhere. These weren't just in enemy lands, they were inside his own palace. Servants spied on each other. Nobles spied on friends. It became impossible to know who to trust. A single rumor could lead to arrest, torture, or death. Henry's court was no longer a place of power. It was a prison ruled by fear, and he was both the jailer and the prisoner. Henry's paranoia didn't stop with strangers. He turned against the people closest to him, his own wives. Most people know he had 6 wives, and that were executed. But the truth behind those stories is even more disturbing. And Boleyn, his second wife, was arrested on charges of adultery, incest, and treason. But there was no real evidence. Henry forced her own friends and family to testify against her. One of the men accused was her brother. He was tortured until he confessed to crimes he never committed, and was forced to watch their executions before facing her own. Henry didn't just kill her, he destroyed her completely. Her reputation, her family, her memory, all erased. Catherine Howard, his fifth wife, was barely a teenager when they married. Henry was old, sick, and angry. When he discovered she had past relationships, he lost control. He created a new law making it treason to marry the king without revealing your sexual history. That law existed only to punish her. She was dragged from her bed and taken to the Tower. Witnesses said she screamed for mercy, calling for her mother, even as the executioner raised his sword. These weren't just broken marriages. They were acts of cruelty, fueled by fear and control. Henry didn't see his wives as people. He saw them as property disposable when they no longer served his needs. Henry's daily life was as extreme as his rule. His eating habits alone could shock even the most loyal subjects. He didn't just eat to survive, he feasted like a man, trying to fill a bottomless pit every day. His kitchen prepared hundreds of dishes: roasted boar, whole chickens, lamb, pies, fish, puddings served by the dozens, bread overflowed from baskets, and jugs of wine lined the tables. It wasn't unusual for Henry to eat meals that could feed 50 people at once, and yet, most of the food went to waste. He would taste a bite or two, then toss it aside. The kitchen staff worked day and night just to keep up. Over 200 people were employed just to prepare his meals. If one dish was too cold or too salty, the cook could be fired or worse. Henry believed some foods made him stronger. He ate swan to feel elegant, venison to become more powerful, and oysters for reasons he never shared. It was as if he thought food could fix what sickness and time had destroyed. Even his dining was filled with fear. Servants had to test everything he ate for poison. Some were forced to eat full plates and wait half an hour just to see if they'd drop dead. Mealtime wasn't joy, it was ceremony and suspicion. As his body grew weaker, his appetite only grew stronger. Food had become one of the few things he could still control. By his final years, Henry VIII could barely stand without help. His legs were so swollen and wounded that walking became impossible. Servants had to lift him from his bed and place him in a special chair with wheels and straps. The smell from his infected wounds filled every room he entered. He was no longer the proud, golden-haired king of his youth. His face was bloated, his eyes tired, and his skin pale and stretched. His clothes had to be custom-made just to fit over his massive body. Even sitting caused him pain. Despite this, Henry refused to admit weakness. He continued to demand absolute obedience. When he couldn't walk into a room, he had people carry him like a warlord on a throne. His presence still struck fear, even when he could barely speak without coughing. Doctors were helpless. They offered treatments, leeches, bleeding, crushed herbs, but none worked. Henry hated them for their failure. Some were dismissed, others imprisoned, just for telling the truth about his health. Even basic things like using the toilet became a royal crisis. Special chairs were built with hidden chambers so he could relieve himself without getting up. Servants were assigned to clean him in secret. It was a shameful routine. Hidden behind velvet curtains, the King of England once feared, once admired, was now a man falling apart in silence, and still, no one dared to look away. The fear Henry spread didn't die with his words that lived in every room of his palace. People whispered behind closed doors, afraid that walls might have ears. Some even believed the king had hidden holes built into walls so he could spy on private conversations. Nobles who once laughed freely at court now stayed silent. One wrong sentence could mean imprisonment. Even praise had to be carefully spoken. If you praised the wrong wife or the wrong son, Henry might think you were plotting something. The line between loyalty and betrayal was razor thin. He began executing people for things they hadn't even done. If someone dreamed of the king dying, or if someone mentioned an old law, it was enough to be arrested. Trials were fast. Punishment was certain. The Tower of London was full of people whose only crime was being near the king. When he was in a dark mood, Henry even doubted his own children. He didn't trust Princess Mary, his eldest daughter, because of her mother. He didn't trust Elizabeth either, fearing she might become more popular than him. Guards were ordered to report everything the girls said and did. They were watched like enemies, not daughters. The court had become a place of fear. Power didn't bring peace, it brought silence. And in that silence, the king ruled alone, angry, sick, and surrounded by ghosts of people he had destroyed. When death finally came for Henry VIII, it did not come quietly. His body had suffered for years, and in the end, it gave out slowly and painfully. He could no longer leave his bed. His skin was stretched tight from swelling, and his breath was heavy and shallow. The stench from his infected legs filled the palace halls. Servants wore herbs around their necks to keep from vomiting. Even doctors, used to the horrors of medieval illness, struggled to stay in the room. No one wanted to be near him, yet no one dared to leave. He refused to let priests near him. He was terrified of admitting death was close to him. Even dying was a sign of weakness. He gave final orders, made demands, shouted at shadows. He spoke to people who weren't there. Some said he thought his dead wives had come to take revenge. When he finally died, his body was in such bad condition that no one wanted to touch it. They wrapped it in cloth and sealed it in layers of lead and wood. The coffin had to be reinforced because of the gas building up inside his decaying body. Even in death, he was dangerous. His body was so bloated, so rotten, that it was treated like a ticking bomb. And they were right to be afraid because something horrifying was about to happen. As Henry VIII's coffin made its slow journey from London to Windsor, something terrifying happened. The gases inside his body kept building up. The heat, the pressure, the decay, all of it reached a breaking point. Somewhere along the road, the coffin burst open, the lead casing cracked, and a thick, foul-smelling liquid spilled out onto the floor of the carriage. People nearby covered their faces and turned away in horror. The stench was unbearable. The royal guards had to stop the procession while servants rushed in with cloths and buckets to clean up the remains. One report claimed that dogs came out of the woods and began licking the mess. The man who once ruled England with an iron fist was now reduced to rotting flesh on a roadside, eaten by strays. No amount of gold, power, or fear could protect him from the truth of death. When they finally reached the burial site, the coffin was too heavy and unstable. The soil beneath the tomb kept sinking. Workers had to widen the grave just to make it fit. It took hours to get the coffin into the ground, and even then, the stench lingered in the chapel for days. The death of a king should have been a moment of silence and honor. But for Henry VIII, it became a scene of panic, disgust, and shame. Even after burial, Henry VIII's legacy refused to rest. For years after his death, people reported strange sounds and smells coming from his tomb. Some believed it was his ghost, trapped by the weight of his sins. Others said it was just more gas escaping from his decaying body, still poisoning the air around him. The servants who had prepared his corpse, those who touched his infected skin and wrapped his swollen limbs, began falling ill. Some died within weeks. No one knew exactly why, but many believed they were cursed. The king who had destroyed so many lives had taken a few more with him. Even in death, Henry VIII left behind a broken kingdom. His son Edward was too young to rule. His daughters Mary and Elizabeth were feared and doubted. The court was full of enemies pretending to be allies. The fear he spread while alive did not vanish, it passed down like a disease. His great dream, the power he fought to protect, all ended in rot and silence. His 6 wives, his endless meals, his cruel punishments, none of it saved him. In the end, he was just a man whose own body betrayed him, piece by piece. This was not the glorious end of a great king. It was the final chapter of a man who ruled through fear and was destroyed by the very power he refused to let go.